the bike. But what was important there is I realized that that role no longer worked for me. That now I was an athlete, and it was now a time to reshift. So that's part of looking at our core values, is looking at our roles and determining which ones are at play and which work for us, and most importantly, which no longer work for us.
Right, it's like throwing out old clothes.
Absolutely.
You know, I had a bunch of clothes. Well, I'm still giving them away. I've gotten up to like 4 or 5 bags now, but I'm really good at gathering up old clothes, and I love clothes. So it's good though. Get rid of these frumpy clothes. Why do I have some of this stuff? You know, just get rid of those old modes we get into, and even sometimes you'll get into a pattern of behavior. You know, we're always talking about behavior and modeling the behavior you want to embody, not necessarily being perfect, but just going ahead and being that way to your best of your ability now. And you know, sometimes you want to just leave behind those old sacred cows of behavior too. Maybe they're creating dysfunctional relationships. Maybe some relationships could transform if you could just transform some of those behaviors.
Absolutely. Do you remember Michelangelo's story that he said there's always a beautiful statue in the stone, and I just simply need to move away all the things that aren't a part of that statue?
Chip away the pieces that aren't the sculpture.
Just love that. And that's true of all of us, that in the stone that we all are, there is a beautiful piece that's in there that is our essence, and that's where we literally stand in our power.
Right.
And so for us, it's just a matter not so much of changing or whatever, but just pulling the pieces that no longer work so that we can shine and be our best. And that's where core values come in. When we use that, that becomes the chisel many times that brings us into our most beautiful self.
Well, you know, it's a great idea. You know, I think the more we live it, just like a muscle or a neural pathway, the more you go down that track, the more you strengthen that ability. So waking up every day, how can you help people to say, how am I living my values? How can I start out? And how would you take this into a daily practice and suggest?
Like most everything, it begins with what? Consciousness awareness, right? Like most of it. So what we want to do is just remember our values, even on the most simplest of decisions. For instance, me stopping to visit my brother. So when we remember those values and bring them, especially on the big decisions, but also in the small ones, it can affect everything that we do. From, as you said earlier, from what we eat, to the activities that we get involved in, to how we relate with other people.
Right. And so in the morning, you know, maybe you've been talking about meditating, carve out even just 15 minutes just to do a few stretches. Come home, maybe take 10 minutes to rest before you transition into that next part of your day. Think about ways to do things that are meaningful to you that maybe you've been overlooking for a little while. You know, something fun that you haven't been giving attention to that you know is meaningful, maybe not just for you, but for a family member.
Everybody has different ways of beginning their day. And one of the things that I do for myself, and I recommend for some of my clients, and the clients that do this love it, is a journaling exercise in the morning. And what I do in the morning is I write, I feel, and I'll write whatever I'm feeling at the time. And it could be tired, it could be anxious, it could be happy or elated, but whatever, I'll put that down. But then what I'll put down is, what is it that I want to bring into this day? And i.e., what are my intentions? And many times it comes back to the core values.
Right.
That as I go through this day, this is what I want to remember. I might even add, these are the roles I want to play, getting back to what we talked about during the day.
Right, or I'm going to focus on giving attention to this role today. Even if you're doing other things that you don't think relate to it.
Absolutely.
You can do things that incorporate that role a little bit. I found when I was looking at the roles, one that I was neglecting was entrepreneur. I know I have all this entrepreneurial stuff and energy and ideas and all this stuff, and I wasn't putting the time into it. And so it was just looking at, hey, am I really cultivating that garden? No. If I want to be, yes.
Absolutely.
Go for it.
Absolutely. Then write down 3 gratitudes, 3 things that you're grateful for. And then I circle back around and end it by writing, again, I feel. And what's so interesting is it normally will shift from where I started from to the end by the time I've gone through, and it helps me begin the day in a more intentional way.
Journaling is a huge, valuable process, psychologically, emotionally. I was just hearing Barbara Marx Hubbard talking about all of her books and all of her work coming from her journals. And journaling is such a powerful tool. I would suggest, get a journal, start doing it. Now, if you want to record your dreams, though, I've heard that you really need to get a little audio record, because the part of your brain that remembers dreams is not the auditory part when you're speaking. So if you begin to speak your dreams, if you begin to write them down, you're accessing a totally different part of your brain than the dreaming part. So you're much better to be able to speak your dreams into a recorder of some kind, or a friend or person. I always love talking over dreams. That way you can capture those. And often you'll find meaning to reflect on in journals too. But the capturing part, I suppose, is a little less elusive when you use a recorder.
Absolutely. Whatever way, dreams can be a wonderful guideline for us as we look forward and try to figure out how to live our lives.
But the core values, Randy Siegel, my guest tonight, and he's got some wonderful books. The Inspired Life, your internal GPS is another thing. Now, there's some neat tools. We've got contact information here at the end. You could always email us with questions at eartheartnetwork@gmail.com. Randy has some great tools. He's got some free tools you can access from his internal GPS, different exercises.
YourInternalGPS.com.
Right. I can only do the websites. But yeah, so it's some really powerful tools about determining whether you're really coming from your strengths and your passion and your purpose. So if you had another guideline, Randy, that you would give someone that you thought was valuable. Now, I know you have spoken on different programs and lots of television, nationally recognized programs. And one of the things you were talking about was women and encouraging women. We had a whole program here in the last few weeks. We've been doing several stories on young girls, how helping the demographic of women around the world is a core through microfinance, credit, loans that really helps the strengthen the family and the core of villages and third world countries all over, that helping women helps more people in society than helping any other demographic. And so when you were talking about women and entrepreneurs, what is some encouraging stuff that you would say to helping some of those women, helping their communities, starting those new businesses?
Well, what's so interesting to me is we are now seeing women outperform men in almost every sector of our society. And when you look at why that is, it's because women have a natural ability to be able to connect. They're naturally empathetic. They're naturally able to look at people holistically, and they have a way of looking at things that are more in the terms of a web or a network as opposed to linear. And these are the skills that are going to be required as we move forward. So women's natural way, or a feminine way of communicating, is going to dictate, I think, a lot of success. So men, we need to take note that to be able to communicate in a more feminine fashion is going to help us both in business and in our personal life.
Right, and a lot of times it's just that orientation of communication where women often communicate to connect, to empathize, to emotionalize together, and not necessarily to fact find or to fix anything. And I think a lot of times men get very focused on that action, on solution-oriented stuff, because they're really good at that. They're really good at getting from point A to B in an action focus. And so the basis of why they're communicating is often the fundamental difference, I think, between men and women communicating. And so bridging that why are we communicating and realizing women are sometimes, wow, will she ever quit talking? Well, because it's not about getting from point A to B. Sometimes it's just about that connection happening in the conversation.
It's back to what we talked about earlier.
New kind of conversation.
It's back to what we talked about earlier. One of the trends we're seeing is the move from transactions to trust. And women generally are very good about building that connection and building that trust.
Now, I missed slightly, you said earlier, what is the new currency? You were saying was the new currency, and I missed the word.
Connection. Connection will become the new currency.
There it is. That's it. I believe that. And you know what else? I think that once we connect, first with our own heart, our own passion, our own truth, and then do that out in our communities, and then do that as global citizens, that all of our seemingly insurmountable problems will be multitudes of options and solutions and ideas for how we can create sustainable culture. The ideas will abound, but it's once we make that connection, once we actually pull together, will we discover that treasure trove of information that we all share by virtue of connecting.
Absolutely. Back to the shift from me to we. No question about it.
Yes. Well, from me to we, Randy Siegel here tonight, living the inspired life. Get your internal GPS activated for your journey home. Live from your core purpose and passion. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. This has been great fun.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you, Randy.
Take care.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Our next segment coming up tonight, Living and Loving. This is a program that we have every week, actually a segment in our program, Eartheart Network News, and it is with Dawn Boone. Dawn has been working with businesses and people as a personal coach and mentor for 50 years nearly now, if not longer, and we are so glad to have Dawn Boone for Living and Loving, our special segment here every week on Eartheart Network News.
And I'm happy to be here.
Hello, Dawn.
I have more fun than that beaver you were talking about.
Well,
otter, excuse me.
The otter that Dawn was telling me about, this
yes.
old Disney show called Otter, Nature's Little Fun Haver. And
That's me.
Yes, that's Dawn. And I was kind of, well, I found that information today on the American river otter is endangered. Yes, they're endangered. They're endangered, and they're not setting aside habitat yet. They're putting them on another waiting list. But you know, the otters can't wait forever. So we've got to keep nature's little fun haver. But we have nature's big fun haver right here, Dawn Boone.
I'm the big one.
And we're talking about living core values. You have helped people and guided them toward doing that more and more. We've heard many of your modicums, modeled them, many things.
Along those lines, I've tried to help people realize that they were living their core values. They had no choice.
They just didn't know.
But they didn't do it intentionally. And our thing is to help people, and Randy mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
To be aware of and live them intentionally.
And people talk about, you know, this thing of creating and manifesting your reality, that what you think of, you'll get more of, and we all create our reality. Well, you know, the funny thing is, when you really think of it, and this is, I think, what you're saying, is we are already masters of manifesting our reality. Just people do not realize they are creating it. They are creating their
Do you
environment.
remember my favorite cartoon? It shows a guy, and he's sitting there, and he's very sad. And he's listening to the music. You can hear Sinatra saying, "I did it my way."
Oh, right, right.
The caption under that is, "Me too, but not on purpose."
And see, that's the challenge, right?
Right.
Doing it on purpose or doing it blindly, bumping our head on those walls of light that we put up ourselves,
and see,
of our own construction.
We're talking about living intentionally and purposefully, and that we are connected with everyone.
We are, yes.
But the only way we can do it and be effective and have the quality we choose is if we do get in touch with our inner self.
Yes, inside.
Right.
It's an inside job.
And then have the confidence to feed it by behaving in keeping with what we believe.
Right, taking some kind of action, even if we, I think this is the key part of one part you were saying, is even if it's not perfect, even if you don't think that it's the exact right thing, just going ahead and doing something in the direction of your dream, of your value that you feel, even something that reflects it in a small way.
Your behavior is so loud they cannot hear what you say.
Yes.
And that's what we have. And as Randy mentioned earlier, keep it simple. If we have too much stuff going around, we have the paralysis of analysis.
Right, and we use sometimes distractions. You know, that's one of the biggest things that is going on in American culture, I think, right now, keeping us in a consumer cycle. Where we're wanting more, eating more. You know, most people that are obese are usually highly malnourished. We're getting more, we're reaching for more, but we're not necessarily being fulfilled more unless we're reaching for those truly nourishing and nurturing behaviors, habits, commitments.
You know, last or 2 weeks ago, we asked our listeners, says, write down your values. Let's see if we can begin to do them on purpose. And, you know, Randy was mentioning that. And we mentioned keep them very, very simple. So let me tell you what I try to have. Very simple. Listen to and follow the inner spirit. We always know, we hear. It's very, very conscious to us, but unless
we have confidence in it and then behave on it, act upon it, it gets weaker